Welcome to the Self-Publishing School podcast. This is the podcast to listen to if you're an aspiring writer or an author who wants to be more successful. On this show, you'll learn how to write and launch a book successfully, all from the top authors and people just like you who are doing it at the highest level. I'm your host, Chandler Bolt, the founder of Self-Publishing School, the author of the book called Published, and the CEO of selfpublishing.com. For free training on how to publish a book that sells 10,000 copies, go to selfpublishing.com/free training. Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is Bob Burg. Bob is a speaker and author of multiple books, including the Go-Giver series, Endless Referrals, a bunch of other books. So we've actually done, I was telling Bob right before the interview, we've done his book, The Go-Giver, as a book club at Self-Publishing School twice. And so it was so good we had to read it again. We keep hiring and keep growing. And so we had to buy a bunch more copies. And it's one of the favorite books that our team's read. And Bob was gracious enough when we did it the first time to come in and do a Q&A with the team. And that is still one of their favorite memories of any book club. And so I think it's a fundamental book that, of course, you should buy it, you should read it, you should implement it in your business and your life. Like, it's just such a great book. And it's one of those rereads for me. It's like, all right, I got to reread this once a year, once every other year, and bring the team through it. So I'm excited today on this interview. We're going to talk about a bunch of his books, but then why those books have sold so well, how to turn your book into a series, and then using the book to grow your speaking business. So I know a lot of people ask about speaking beyond the book. So we're going to talk about that. Bob, really great to have you here.
Chandler, thank you. And what kind words, especially coming from you, who's done really so much for this entire industry and has helped so many people to be able to position themselves and do all the great things that having a book can help a person do. So thank you.
Yeah, well, Bob, I know we were mentioning right before this, you were saying your first book, not the Go-Giver, kind of was a positioning tool for you in the marketplace. So talk to us about that book and what was the purpose behind it? Why did you decide to write that first book?
Yeah, well, so I'd been speaking for, I guess, about 3 years or so, and had a growing business. I was at a National Speakers Association conference, speaking with a few of the people there who had done really well. And they said, Burg, you're at a point right now where if you're going to go to that next level, you really need to have a book. It's going to help you position yourself better, make yourself more marketable. It's going to help you get higher fees. So there were a lot of advantages to having a book. And that was really, so at the time, my main topic was on referral business, business networking, really. And back then, and that was back in the day, this was back in the mid 90s when there weren't 1,000 networking books out there as there are now. And by the way, I love all the networking books I read. I learned something from every one of them. But back then there were very few. So my book, which was titled Endless Referrals, and then the subtitle was Network Your Everyday Contacts into Sales, really, that was a great idea I received from those great pros who advised me, because it really did. Now, what I did is, it's not as though once I put it out there, and you know this, Chandler, it's not like you're going to get all these calls. Hey, saw your book out there. Can you speak for our company? No, I used it as a proactive marketing tool. Okay, so so doing that just really, really helped me sell my services a lot faster, a lot easier, and more consistently.
And when you say using it as a proactive tool, what did that look like? How did you do that? And why do you think that book was such a critical part of you kind of growing your business?
Yeah, so when I mean proactively, and back in the day when I started, I mean, you determined what your niche was going to be, and you got out now I think these are online, but back in the day they weren't, the National Trade Professional Association Directory and the State and Regional Association Directory. Those are sort of the two association Bibles, okay, back then. And again, you determined who you were going after, and the market you could serve, that you also felt the message was not only congruent, but that you would want to speak with, because you want to enjoy what you're doing, obviously, and you want to be speaking with people you enjoy speaking to and who will be receptive to the message. I call it the marketing bridge first, do they need it? Okay. Do they want it? And can they afford it? So they may need it, great, but do they want it? So if they don't want it, then you have a decision to make. Do you want to take a lot of time educating them as to why they should want something that they don't believe they do? Because if they don't want it, they can't afford it. Right? We know that. Now, sometimes even if they do want it, they can't necessarily afford it. But but that's for you to do your research and know if the market you want to work with is going to be able to. Okay, but they first, do they need it? Do they want it? And then if they want it, now can they afford it? And part of that is, are you able to communicate your message to them so that they understand why they can afford it? Okay, and again, this assumes a priori that you would be bringing immense value to that marketplace. So what I would do is I would make the calls. I'd have my opening question in terms of eliciting their interest. And I would often say, I don't know if you are familiar with my book, Endless Referrals. And I'd kind of give a little pause to see. And if they said no, I'd say, well, I would be delighted to send it to you if it's something that you feel. And this is after, by the way, after my initial statement asking, determining whether they would want this kind of program. So again, it's not like I just sent the book indiscriminately and people got me off the phone by saying, oh yeah, send the book and boom. No, I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking once I was satisfied that they were genuinely interested, that I was speaking with someone who was either the decision maker and or the point person that would bring it to the committee. Yeah, okay, so and then letting them know, I'd certainly be delighted to send it. Now, if that was the case, okay, and again, I felt good about the fact that they were going to, probably read it. You never know, but at that point, now in my follow-up, if they enjoyed the information in the book, well, now it was a matter of, could we put something together?
Yeah, that's amazing. And so that ultimately led to you getting booked for those gigs or for you getting inside their organization. And then would you bring and sell books when you went to speak, or like, what did that whole process look like?
So at the time, I did not actually sell books at the event. What I had a series of, back then, it was cassette tape programs. I mean, that's how long ago this was. The cassette tape albums, we used to call. So I would get a fee, which back then wasn't a particularly big fee. I was just a few years into it. And then I would sell the cassette tape programs, and that was actually where I made more money doing that than in the than through my speaking fee. But once I did a program, and I was now at the point where obviously that customer knew, liked, trusted me, felt good, I could work a horizontal market and receive lots of referrals across that niche. And of course, I would always just say, please let them know that I'd be glad, that you could get Burg to easily send a book if they would like, and so forth. And so again, it made it very easy to get my foot in the door through a book. Now, we always need to remember, people are always receiving books that are unsolicited. My feeling is, get permission to send the book, or have it recommended so that they want this, because if they don't value it, it loses its entire positioning utility.
Love that. And so it sounds like you were using a book. It's so funny. It's like a lesson within a lesson, right? You were using a book not only to get booked, but then as a referral strategy, so that you could turn one speaking gig into multiple speaking gigs, but always adding value, always qualifying that, hey, this is a topic that you're interested in. This is something that you need, want, and are willing to pay for. But then really building it to okay, I came and I brought value here. Who else do you know? And let me send a book as a starting point kind of for that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, that is basically it. And I would do other things aside from the book, because I back then wrote a lot of articles for the trade and professional magazines that they had. And again, back then these weren't online, because who knew what online was other than, certain people who were already familiar with it. But so I wrote a lot of articles. So I got myself out there so that people, now of course you can do that online with their within those markets as well. So I'm not saying the book is necessarily the only thing, but I am saying it's a very important thing. And that when you have that, there is credibility with it, just by, the very nature that you've authored a book. Of course, you know this, I'm talking to the master, so, you know that. But when they do read it, I mean, the information is basically letting them know whether you're the right person for them or not in terms of speaking. They're either going to, because, there were people who maybe read Endless Referrals, if they didn't relate to it or relate to the way that I was teaching, they weren't going to want me. And that's fine, because that's how it should be. But it also was, if they did like that message, they were going to want me there.
Absolutely. And so are there any other ways that you can think of, or that you've seen, like if we're talking about kind of the endless referral strategy, are there any other ways that you've used your books to drive referrals in your business or to book more speaking gigs?
I mean, I certainly have always utilized the books as a way to get media and get interviews. Okay. Right. Because again, when you have a book, it's a lot easier to book yourself as an expert, right? And I don't even like saying expert about me, because I always think an expert saying, well, I'm an expert. No, I'm a student, but with a certain amount of authority, which I guess is author is the root of authority. So when we're an author, we are positioned as an authority or an expert, however, and it's easier to get interviews. Now, with those interviews, especially the ones that were on TV, and of course, now everything's TV because we're on the internet, it's all TV, in a sense, video, is you can take those and utilize those as part of your positioning. To me, everything we do in terms of positioning, marketing, and sales strategies is all a matter of holistically tying everything together. So one thing always leads to the next, or it always brings it back to a central point. And the great thing is, it's not that complicated. And I don't want it to sound like it is. I do a few things consistently every day, and I've been doing it from the beginning pretty much. You know what I'm saying?
What are those things consistently every day?
Well, so back when I was first starting out in speaking, it was that list. It was getting on the phone. It was, I say dialing for dollars, but it wasn't as though they were just, I knew who I was calling. I knew that, again, that had been determined. Okay. And making the calls, I would be writing articles. I would be doing interviews whenever I could. I would be right. And so now with the Go Giver, it's a little bit different, because I was already established when that came out, but that certainly took my business to a new level. And I'll tell you how. With Endless Referrals, and I had other books after Endless Referrals, but that was always my biggest one. Okay. And the one I was positioned within the marketplace. When the Go Giver came out, which of course is a parable, it's a story. So it has much more of an emotional connection with people. And that's really thanks to the awesome writing of John David Mann, who was the lead writer and storyteller. I'm a how-to guy, right? I'm step 1, step 2, step 3, blah, 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 blah. Follow a system. What's a system? A system is the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles. If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired result of B, all you need to do is A and continue to do A, you'll eventually get the desired result of B. You teach a magnificent system that takes people from not having published a book to writing, publishing, marketing, doing all the things. If they follow your system, they're going to succeed. Okay, so that's what I'm a system person. But I always like to make sure people know systems do not conflict. There's no dichotomy between a system and being relationship focused and people oriented. Okay. It's that the system serves the relationship building, right? It's not the other way around. The system is the servant, not the master. Okay. We use systems. We love people and use systems. not love systems and use people, right? And so, but
Yes.
after the Go Giver came out, and again, I did an immense amount of publicity on it, but that it sold because the people who were already doing those things in their life and in their business long before the book came out, they just related to the story. They related to the principles. John and I both received so many emails from people, I mean, leaders of large organizations who said, this is what I've been trying to tell people is the way to do it. But they have, so we were almost third-party credibility, right? And so company,
100%.
so instead of me having to really utilize it as a proactive marketing tool, it sort of became its own marketing tool. And we received a lot more inquiries now for speaking. Now, I still do the few things every day. I'm still doing interviews every day, okay? I'm still blogging, you know, I'm still doing my work to keep this out in front of the public. You know, I mean, it's just, there's nothing sexy about it. And I almost, you know, when people ask about how do you sell, you know, 1 million books, how do you, you know, whatever, I wish I could tell you there's some sexy one size fits all. And I know that gets sold sometimes as though there is, but there isn't. Right. You do a few things that are proven to be effective and you do them. I mean, you know.
Yeah. I love that. And it's kind of similar to one of my favorite quotes, George Washington Carver's, that do the uncommon or do the common things in an uncommon way and you will command the attention of the world, right?
Absolutely.
And doing the common things consistently, which I love that you narrowed in on. It was, it is being consistent, right? Because and over time, so, and I think there's big takeaways here for folks, which is, you know, every day you're on the phone, talking with people that could potentially book you, from a speaking perspective. You're creating content, you're doing PR, publicity.
Absolutely. Those are basically
and I love what you said about the whole holistic thing, because it all feeds in, like all that stuff feeds into the book sales, all the book sales feed into your speaking, and it's kind of a holistic and virtuous cycle.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. Absolutely.
So let's walk through. I mean, I know you touched on it a little bit. So you do endless referrals. It's really kind of not kickstarting, but just really growing your business. You're becoming an authority, root word author in the space, and then you go on to write and publish the Go Giver. So why did you decide to write and publish that book? And you touched on it a little bit, but I'd love to just hear if there's any other thoughts here of like, why do you think that book sold so well?
Yeah. So the Go Giver came about because after Endless Referrals, and by the way, basically Endless Referrals was about teaching, again, a system for people who are entrepreneurs and salespeople who believed in what they did. They loved their product or service. They knew they brought magnificent value to their customers and clients. However, they didn't feel comfortable in the process of going out there and building those relationships. And to me, these relationships culminate in what I call, and what was the basic premise of Endless Referrals, which has sort of been my, I guess, mantra that I've become known for almost 30 years now. And that is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. Okay, that was the premise of Endless Referrals. So I thought, what if we could take that, and by the way, throughout the years though, I'd always read parables and enjoyed them very much. Why? Because they're stories. And I think it's part of human nature that stories connect. They connect on a heart-to-heart level, right? I mean, they allow you to make an emotional connection with, now in my case, it was as the reader, okay, because I'd always read parables. And the author was able to make a connection with me, teach me something that I wanted to learn and could apply, and just felt great about it, right? So I thought, what if we could take the premise of Endless Referrals, the know, like, and trust, and turn it into a parable? So I thought, okay, so what in titling it, because as you know, the title is so very important. And so, well, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Well, we do. You know, I mean, we judge a book by its title, right? Yes. So the title and subtitle are so important. That's why with Endless Referrals, I remember the publisher had wanted me to call it Networking for Success, because there were very few networking books out there at the
Oh
time.
my
And
gosh.
while,
No.
that's an okay
Yeah.
title, it was more a feature than anything else, Networking for Success. So I said, no, what is
Yes.
it that people really want who would be reading this book? What's the end goal? Referrals, not just referrals, but endless referrals. That's the title. Short, sweet,
Mm.
pithy, endless referrals. Now we can take the subtitle and describe it. Network your everyday contacts into sales. Okay, so
Mm.
now I felt we had a
Mm.
title for that. Okay, so how do you take that book, the premise, the know, like, and trust, turn it into a title for a parable? So I thought, well, what is the essence, if you will, of a person who's able to both quickly and sustainably develop those know, like, and trust relationships? And the answer is they're always giving. They're giving value to others. Their entire focus is on providing value to others, value to the marketplace. Not in a self-sacrificial way, but in a way
Mm.
that helps everyone involved. Okay, but that the focus is on the other person. I always say, when I speak at a sales conference, I'll often begin by saying, nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet. Okay, they're not going to buy from you because you need the money or because you're a nice guy. They're not going to buy your book because you have a certain number of sales you want to make, or because right. So it's always about them and why they would. So they're always so great salespeople. These relationships, they're always giving value. So it's easy to come up with the go-giver. Now, one other reason about the title was it's a pattern interrupt. We're familiar with the go-getter. So the go-giver is kind of a, what? What do you mean? I always thought go-getter. Now, here's the interesting thing. A go-getter is not the opposite of a go-giver. We love go-getters,
Right.
because go-getters take action, right? You can have the best
Yeah.
ideas, the greatest thoughts, the most fantastic intent, but unless action is put into the mix, nothing's going to happen. So no, we love go-getters, people of action, and go-givers, people focused on creating value for others. The opposite of a go-giver is a go-taker, right? But in people's minds, there is that sort of connection with that go-getter, go-giver. So I felt the go-giver title was really good. So now it was a matter of teaming up with John David Mann. And John I had not met John at the time. He was the editor-in-chief of a magazine I used to write for, and he was a great writer, a fantastic storyteller. Not many people back then knew of John. Now, these days, because after the success of The Go-Giver, he became the golden boy in that agents and publishers who had someone, maybe a celebrity or a high-powered business person or someone who had a story, but they needed an author. John became, John was either ghostwriter or co-author. So now, this guy's a multi-New York Times best-selling author. But back then, very few people knew who John was. Fortunately, I was one of them who did. So I asked John, and when I say asked, I mean pleaded with John to be the co-author, the lead writer, because I knew he could do. I mean, again, I'm a how-to author. I knew John could do things with that it was out of my strength zone. And so we collaborated on that, teamed up with it, and and was able to put that together. But that's really how that came about. Then, after the success of the first one, it became a series. But when you talk about titles and how important they are, can I give you a story of something, a very difficult lesson that was learned?
100%. Yeah. And I think I've already loved what you're talking about, like takeaway for people, benefit driven title. And I love how you did that with Endless Referrals. You did that with a go-giver. Hey, Chandler Bolt here. I hope you're loving this episode so far. It's time to go from inspiration to implementation. All right, so if you've learned something, we want to help you implement what you've learned with your book. So what I want you to do right now is go to selfpublishing.com/schedule, book a publishing consultation with one of the experts on my team. We'll talk about your goals for your book, your dreams, your challenges, your next steps, and we'll start putting together a plan. All right, so go to selfpublishing.com/schedule, book a call with the team. Let's see how we can help with your book. It's time to implement. But then also it seems like there's a good kind of symbiotic relationship between the two books, because it sounds like the Endless Referrals is more the how-to and the Go Giver is the why. And so that they kind of feed in together.
Yeah.
So tell us about the story with titles.
You're right. And, and even with a title, if it's like with the Go Giver, you know what the benefit in that title was? It wasn't so much a benefit like Endless Referrals, where it was tangibly, you knew what that was. But with the Go Giver, it implied a certain benefit. And so people almost, I think, gave it their own meaning. Now, when you have a title like that, okay, it's still important to have that subtitle underneath that's more descriptive to give the right. So after the Go Giver came out, and it fortunately was a very big success, and then we had Go Givers Sell More, which is the only book in the series which is not a parable. That's more of a follow-up guide to the Go Giver. But then the publisher asked us to do another one, and it was more on leadership. It would be how, Pindar and his proteges and all the people in the Go Giver universe in that city, the fictional city, how they would apply the Go Giver principles to leadership and so forth. And we named the book a title that we thought was really clever, that we thought, and again, the key word here, thought, that people would really get. We called it, the title of the book, It's Not About You. And we sort of based it on the law of influence from the first book, that your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Well, within the story, within the context of a story, that worked. But as a title, and we thought, because of all our now, new Go Giver readers, anything, we just put it out, it's going to sell, they're going to get it. People stayed away in droves. Okay? Nobody bought the book. And I mean, a few people bought it and they really liked it. And I think the story was probably even a little better than the original Go Giver one. Very few people bought it. And I got to tell you, for a couple of years, I was on a mission to determine why this title didn't sell, because I thought it was a great title. It's the ultimate talking about pleasure. So, and so one day, I'm actually talking to John Ziegler, who's Zig Ziglar's son, and who's doing a fantastic job carrying on his dad's legacy. And we were just talking, and I told him about this, and I said, I still cannot figure to this day, John, why that title, It's Not About You, didn't sell. And John, who has that kind of, I think, innate sense of wisdom like his dad and mom had, he said, well, Bob, I'm thinking, if I'm about to buy a book and the title is, It Isn't About Me, it isn't about you, it's not about me, why would I want to buy it? And I thought, well, that makes sense. There's also another part. One reason the Go Giver sold so many books is because so many people gave it as a gift. And you can give someone a book with the title, The Go Giver, and it's a compliment. You give someone a gift of a book, It's Not About You, and it's sort of like giving someone a bottle of Scope mouthwash. The person, what's wrong with it, right? So John David Mann and I asked the publisher to do something unprecedented. And that is, let's rename the book. Let's retitle it, right? We did actually change the ending a little bit and made it even a little better. And we put a discussion guide in it and a Q&A, as we have with all the books in the series now. But so we updated a little, but mainly we updated the name. And we turned It's Not About You into The Go Giver Leader, which became the second book in the parable series. Okay, we have the Go Giver Leader, and the Go Giver Influencer. Go Giver Sell More, again, isn't a parable. Well, all of a sudden, the sales start coming in. A change in title is really what did it. Wow. It was now part of the brand, which had been beginning to grow, so people were comfortable with the Go Giver brand, the Go Giver Leader. It also talked about what it is about, what it's about, leadership. It's so much was wrong about what we did in calling it It's Not About You. We did not provide the potential readers with the opportunity to know why this is something they really would want to get.
It's a great point. And it wasn't totally clear whether or not the book was for them and what they're going to learn, which
Exactly.
the Go-Giver Leader, when I hear that, I say, oh, I'm a leader. I need that book.
Exactly.
and maybe I've heard of the Go-Giver, but I'm a leader. So I'm going to buy that one.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep. Exactly.
And so
What a mistake that was.
Of the series, so I think big takeaway, the right title makes all the difference. Get feedback, make sure it's benefit driven, make sure that people understand how it's going to help them. And I think the thing that you guys really nailed with the Go Giver is I know you were saying it's not as benefit driven as Endless Referrals, but I think really the benefit is it's an identity. And so people take on the identity as the end result.
Yes.
And they give it to other people who they see that.
Yeah, you just nailed it right there. Exactly. Yep.
So of the series, which I mean, obviously the Go Giver, I assume is the sells the most out of the whole series, but of the books that are not the main book, which one is sold the best, and why do you think that is?
Which one sold the best? Well, yeah, the original one that's close to 975,000 copies now. We say 950 because that was the last count, but we're pretty sure it's right at 975 right now. So we're
knocking on that million bookmark. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. That'll be fun.
But what about the other ones? Which one of the other ones has really resonated?
Go Givers Sell More has sold well over 100,000 copies. But again, that's the sort of the implementation of so a lot of the people who bought the Go Giver bought Go Givers Sell More because that sort of even gave them more information that they wanted. The Go Giver Leader probably still is the least, I'd say, selling. Go Giver. The Go Giver Influencer, our newest one, which I believe is actually the best book in the series, that's selling pretty well. That it took a while to find its audience, but it's starting to now really pick up.
Awesome. Let's talk to you about, we're kind of in the home stretch here. I want to talk about, so we've kind of talked about the book, we've talked about the series. I want to talk a little bit about the speaking and workshop side of your business, because it seems like that's, at least from going on your site and from what I know about you, it's like that seems like the main path for people after they read the book. Is that correct? Is like either bringing you in to speak, attending one of the workshops, or there's also, you've got the online courses there?
Yeah, there's a few things. And at 62, I'm now doing much less. I'm limiting myself to 20, what we call corporate speeches or organizational, the keynotes outside of Florida. I just, I'm kind of over, and this is even before this coronavirus thing. For the last couple of years, I've taken on no more than 20 out of state engagements, doing much more online and in person with some of the events we have. Now, my business partner, Kathy Tagenel, and I have events we hold that are public events in Orlando, which is about 2.5 hours north of me, though we're going to start having them in Jupiter, which is where I live as well. As you can tell, I really like the not traveling any further than I have to, even by car, type of thing. And so, we had been holding something called the Go Giver Entrepreneurs Academy, but we've sort of now morphed into the Go Giver Sales Academy. And it's not called Academy, pardon me, it's called Endless Referrals, the Go Giver Way 2-day workshop. And so we limit those to like 25 to 30 people because it's very specific and it's over 2 days. And so it's a lot of, how to back and forth and really helping people to hear. So that's something. Then we have a online course coming out, which should be out in about 3 weeks. We've been affectionately, and when I say affectionately, I mean not affectionately, calling it the Never Ending Project because it's taken put together. But that should be out in about 3 weeks, called Endless Referrals, the Go Giver Way, and that will be about a 9-hour online video course. And then we also have a certified Go Giver speaker program, which is a licensing program where people buy the rights to license my intellectual properties, if you will, and we teach them how to become paid professional speakers, utilizing the Go Giver, Endless Referrals, Genuine Influence, all the different things. So that's what we pretty much do. And so again, one thing goes into the other. Now again, very few people, relatively speaking, will become speakers and coaches. Many more will attend to the programs. Hopefully many more than that will watch the online videos, and hopefully many more than that will read the book. So again,
Right.
and again, no more than 20 will bring me in to speak, because I won't speak more than 20 times outside of the state. So,
So how have you seen, like, as the books have grown in popularity and grown in success? I really want to speak for the people who maybe want to use a book as part of growing their speaking business, or maybe if we have time at the end, we can touch on the workshop piece. But like, how have you seen, as those books have grown and sold more, that impacting your speaking business? What have been the main benefits there? Like, has that predominantly been the main source of revenue for a long time? And I imagine some of that's now shifting to the workshops, to the online courses, things like that.
well, I mean, I think most people that have a book, as we know, the biggest portion of the money is not in the book itself. I mean, the royalties from the Go-Giver have been very good, but even that wouldn't be certainly enough to live on, in any significant way. So I think when that happens and someone has a book like that, great. I hope everyone who publishes their book through you, who goes through you and takes your course, I hope that happens. But it's not something we can depend on. I think
Right.
a smart business strategy is to ask yourself, how am I going to use this book in order to accomplish what I want my business model to be in terms of serving others? Okay. So if someone is a coach, now I'm not a coach. I don't do one-on-one coaching, other than, for my speakers, of course, but that's a whole different model. But as far as being a coach, if your goal is to then utilize the book with that in mind as the back end of it. I mean, that's what you would do. If you want to be a speaker, again, the same thing. So my feeling is always having that in mind. What is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to write this book for? It's not just because I want to write a book and publish a book. Now, if that is the reason, that's fine too, but at least going in, that is your reason. But that's not a business plan. That's just
Right. Right. Stephen Covey would say, begin with the end in mind, right?
begin
So
with the
think
end.
about where you're going, and then,
Exactly.
so for you, was that the speaking? Was that to grow speaking originally? And then I would imagine
Sure.
that shifted as you're on the road all the time.
I used to be called a speaker who writes. Okay. Now I'm more a writer who speaks, because the writing is much more important to me at this point in my life. I just have ideas I want to share and get out. The market, of course, will let me know if it was a good idea or not. But back then it was I really didn't want to write a book. That wasn't something if you asked, what do you want to write? No, I really don't. But it was something I did because I felt that the end result was going to be worthwhile.
And how did you see the popularity of the book affecting your speaking fee, affecting inbound requests? Like, what were kind of the tangible, in terms of, like, how much were you speaking before? What did your fee look like? How much were you speaking after? What did your fee look like? And then were you selling books at every speaking gig to maximize that? Or, like, what did that whole process look like?
Well, with endless referrals, it definitely helped me to book myself. It helped me position myself in the marketplace much better. And the fees, I was able to get higher fees and book myself more regularly than I think I would have had I not had the book to help position me. I've never really, regardless of which book it was, I've never really sold books at the events. And one reason for me is it's kind of laziness. I don't want to be having a bunch of books that I'm worried, that I'm responsible for lugging around and getting and this and that. So that's just not something I wanted to do. Also, selling books beforehand is a great way of position. Now, of course, you can do that easier when you've self-published, because you have control over what you can sell them for. Phil Jones, originally from the UK, now living in New York, who's a very popular speaker and is selling oodles of books. That's what he does. He puts selling books within the within the agreement that he negotiates, so that they have his book beforehand. And so which is, again, a great idea. I think it depends upon the book. With the Go-Giver, again, because it's a story, I really want those attending conferences. If I'm speaking at a conference, they probably haven't heard of me, Bob Burg, who am I, but they've either heard of the book, or if they read the book first, they're going to be a lot more excited about hearing me. Because again, they're not coming to see Bob Burg.
Right.
Okay. So if they read the book, then there's an emotional connection. And so I've encouraged my speaking clients, because typically they read the book, which is how they heard, and said, to the degree that you can get this into your organization before I speak, that's the degree that they're going to be very excited about hearing me. Otherwise, it's,
Yeah.
who's this?
Right. Okay. And so is that just kind of is that a suggestion? Are you building in pre-sales before you go speak? How does that work?
It's a suggestion, but we have we use BookPal and but they just changed their name, and I'm trying to think, it was HCR, and I can't think of what the name they go by now is, but they're another.
Yeah.
It used to be gosh, I'm going to actually, while we're doing this, I'm going to do something I very rarely do. I'm going to multitask, and I don't want to even multitasking because I'm really not good at it, as I don't think most people are. But okay, so Porchlight Books, formerly 800 CEO Read, Porchlight.
Yes, yeah.
Those are two corporate resellers that give really good prices on the books that people can get. So yeah, we encourage them to do it, but no, we keep it at the same fee. But again, I've been doing this for a long time, so there's a little bit more of an established, type of thing. When you're starting out, it might be a little bit different.
Right.
But again, that's one reason why self-publishing, once you've amortized, your investment in the books, now you can pretty much decide, do you use it as a loss leader? Do you make $1 or $2 profit on each? Do you, what have you?
That's a great point. So final couple questions here. What would be your advice to the person who, I love how you said, I used to be a speaker that writes, and now I'm a writer that speaks. And so for maybe, I would say probably, I don't know, maybe probably more common listening to this or watching this is the writer that wants to speak.
Oh, sure.
And so what would be your advice for them on getting their first couple of speaking gigs after publishing their book?
Well, so first I would, like anything, I would learn from the people who have done it. Okay. So I know this is something you certainly are very good when it comes to knowing how to get speaking engagements. There are people like David Newman, who has a great book called Do It Speaking. There's Jane Atkinson, who has a great Wealthy Speaker 2.0. There's Lois Kramer, who does a fantastic job. I would also suggest they consider joining National Speakers Association, because that's the business of speaking. So I think to the degree that people will learn the business of speaking and approach it that way, that's really the degree. Phil Jones, who I talked about in Phil's book, and I'm trying to think of the name of it right now. It's a wonderful book, and I'm ashamed of myself for not remembering. I'm going to do something now again that I'm very not good at, and that's multitask. And Phil, I'm just going to put in the Amazon thing, Phil Jones. Yeah, it's called Exactly What to Say. Yeah. And he's just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Such a nice guy. And so again, I think to the degree that you seek out that information, that's the degree you're gonna know how to follow a system, the process of predictive, right? That will help you in that regard.
Awesome. And hey, last question. Bob, knowing what you know now, you've obviously done multiple books. You've done fables. You've done standard nonfiction books. You've spoke, there's just so much, just a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of experience.
Knowing what I know now with all the mistakes I've made is what I'm okay.
What would you say to that?
I'm thinking, if only they knew.
Yeah, right. That's it's the iceberg fallacy of like all the mistakes that are below the surface. People just see the trophy and they don't see the journey. But knowing what you know now, what would you say to the other Bobs that are out in the audience that maybe haven't written that first book yet? And so think back to Bob, the first time author. What would your advice be for those folks?
Oh, I'd say is if you have information to share, get that book written. Absolutely. Don't worry about, that the topic has been written before. It has been. Okay. Don't worry about other people have done this. They have, but they're not you. And they don't come from the same experience you have. They don't know how you feel about what happened. These other people haven't described it as you can describe it based on your, right? So, I mean, how many books have I read on sales? Hundreds and hundreds, right? I mean, basically sales is sales, but everyone has their own experiences and we can learn from it. How many books have I read on marketing or on politics or on this or on that? Lots of them, okay? But people have their own viewpoint. And they have their own, so I'm either going to learn something new or I'm going to relearn something that I already did know but hadn't thought about in that way. So don't sell yourself short. If you have wisdom, if you have information that people will benefit from and you have a need inside you to share that information, by all means, go ahead.
That's awesome. Bob, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time and so much helpful. I mean, I feel like we've covered so much and so many critical pieces, not only to write and publish and market a successful book, but to use it to grow your speaking business, to use it to drive referrals, like so many great things here. Where can people go to find out more about you, your books, your workshop, the course, all those things?
Probably the best place is Burg, BURG.com. And I would just say explore the site. Go through it, and there's a whole bunch of resources there, and you can kind of pick and choose what looks interesting to you.
Awesome. And I mean, I know I said this at the top of the interview. I'll repeat it. It's a great book. Buy it, read it. There's a reason I have read it multiple times and we've met for, usually it's 3 to 4 weeks, 1 hour per week with my entire company. That's a very expensive meeting. And so there's a reason why we do that and prioritize that. And that's because, I believe in the fundamentals of this book. And I believe that it's just a fundamental thing that you need to know and you need to be doing in your business and in your life. So I recommend it. Grab the book. Awesome.
It means a lot to me. Thank you.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of the Self-Publishing School podcast. I know there's so many places that you can be spending your time. There's other podcasts that you could be listening to, YouTube channels that you could be watching. So thank you so much. It means the world. Now, I want you to do 3 things right now if you found this episode helpful. All right, number 1, I don't know if you know this, but we've got a YouTube channel. It's a companion channel to this podcast. All the video versions of the episode are on the YouTube channel. So number 1, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Number 2, if you're listening to this podcast wherever, whether this is Spotify, Apple Podcasts, number 2, I want you to subscribe to this podcast right now so you don't miss a future episode. And then number 3, this is probably the most important, leave a review on the podcast. All right, reviews are super important and help the podcast get discovered by other people. So number 3, leave a review on the podcast. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode. If you're on the fence about scheduling a publishing consultation call with my team, maybe you're not quite ready for that, I've got some free training that I think will be really helpful for you. All right, all you have to do is go to register to sign up. Go to selfpublishing.com/free training. When you do, you're also going to get a free digital copy of my new book published. And on that training, you're going to learn the next steps, so how to implement with your book. So how to write, how to publish, how to launch successfully. So go to register right now at selfpublishing.com/free training. I'll see you there.